Chip Lindsey, Missouri's new offensive coordinator, fits the Eli Drinkwitz mold, but some are asking why didn't he win more with Drake Maye?
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And of course, on today's show, we got to talk about Braggin Rights, whether Jaden Stone plays or not. And, well, we have some differing opinions and maybe thought perspectives on that. But regardless, can the Tigers actually win this game? A game that they really need, maybe in their biggest and best opponent so far. But before I start the show, I do want to remind you, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket event purchase. And by the way, I mentioned Drake Maye there in the tease. Well, he was the New England Patriots quarterback, of course. And, well, I thought it was kind of timely to bring up Drake Maye since, well, he was the last football game I watched. The Patriots took down the Baltimore Ravens last night on Sunday Night Football. And Maye, obviously in his second year with the Patriots, has emerged as one of the stars of the league right now. And he called Michigan coach Sharon Moore, by the way. Hey, he's been in the news a little bit lately. Maybe we'll talk about Sharon at some point on the podcast, though I doubt it, quite frankly. But the point here is that Drake actually went to Sharon Moore when he was still Michigan's head coach before this season and vouched for Chip Lindsey as he was interviewing for that Michigan OC spot. By the way, Lindsey did just spend one season at Michigan this past year. And famously, for those of us who follow college football, well, Michigan paid about $5 million reportedly for the services of true freshman, five-star recruit Bryce Underwood at quarterback. So the thought was, hey, let's bring in Chip Lindsey to mentor this young man. And certainly the results were up and down in Bryce Young's first season in Ann Arbor. Well, heck, a lot of things were up and down. Let's not get too visual. A lot of things were let's say, varying in Ann Arbor this past season. So the thing is, I don't know how much I'm going to put the struggles of Michigan's offense this past season on Chip Lindsey, or just, hey, the growth of a young true freshman at quarterback. So the thing is, this hire to me by Eli Drinkwitz really does seem to me to be more about quarterback development than it is about play calling, because I really don't think, for example, that the run scheme is going to change very much here. I think you're still going to see a lot of outside zone from Missouri. And frankly, there really isn't much wrong with the Missouri run scheme. It's the passing game that needs, at the very least, subtle changes, if not a complete overhaul. Now, I don't think it's necessarily a complete overhaul, by the way. I think certain subtle changes, just counters to whatever Missouri's bread and butter plays are, which, by the way, Missouri's bread and butter passing game plays like levels, concepts, and crossing routes, and a lot of the stuff that they run is not exactly wildly different than what a lot of the best offenses in the country run for some of their bread and butter plays too. I just think the difference is maybe it's timing. It's mixing stuff up at the right moment and just simply, well, I don't know what it is, to be honest with you, in super specific terms, but I do think a new set of eyes, a fresh set of eyes, just in terms of X's and O's and play calling should make a difference. But once again, I think this hire is really about developing Matt Zollers. I think that's the number one job of Chip Lindsey here, or whomever Missouri brings in the transfer portal as well. But I think that's what this is really all about. And by the way, one of my best buddies in the entire world, Jason, who has covered North Carolina and the Triangle area for many years, along with his father, by the way, well, he had this to say about Chip Lindsey to me yesterday. He said, you know how UNC had Drake Maye but his coaching staff still couldn't win anything with him. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chip Lindsey. Well, thanks for that one, JJ. But honestly, is that a fair criticism? As much as I love that biting commentary from the best man at my wedding, is this really a fair criticism? Because North Carolina, quite honestly, hasn't won anything, period, in football in my lifetime. Yes, they've won 5 ACC championships, but they haven't won one since 1980. And by the way, just for example, yes, you can have your struggles as a head coach, as in maybe not live up to, for example, Cliff Kingsbury didn't win anything with Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, but I still think he's a pretty good offensive coordinator at the NFL level. I get the reaction. I just think it's a little bit more complicated than that. And quite honestly, when you look at North Carolina's history, the 2 seasons that Drake Maye was a starter, well, let's see, 22 and 23. Let me pull up the numbers here real quick. Yeah, 9-5 and 8-5. Not anything necessarily to write home about, but the last 2 seasons for North Carolina following Maye, 6-7 and 4-8. Before that, 6-7, 8-4, 7-6, 2-9, 3-9. So this is going all the way back to 2017. So the idea that North Carolina didn't win anything, well, they won more than they did in the previous 10 years since 2015. The only double-digit season North Carolina's had in, gosh, how far do you have to go back? Since 1997, North Carolina's had one double-digit win season. So I'd say a 9 and an 8 win season for Chip Lindsey in 22 and 23 is actually a fairly reasonable outcome. And again, if we're not going to do QB wins as a stat, well, I don't think OC wins is really a stat either. By the way, Wyoming didn't win anything with Josh Allen, probably because he was at Wyoming, not necessarily anything that was Josh Allen's fault, but also like Josh Allen, I think Drake Maye is a guy who improved a lot in the NFL, especially this past season. A couple of guys with real physical talent. The thing is, I think the idea that Chip Lindsey didn't do well with North Carolina and Drake Maye, I just don't really see the case for that. If your thing is, hey, they should win the conference or win the national championship with Drake Maye, well, there's a lot of examples of that not happening with elite quarterbacks at the NFL level. That's my main point there. And to the idea that Lindsey really fits the Eli Drinkwitz mold, well, interestingly, he's 51 years old. I was just talking about how Corey Batoon is a relatively old defensive coordinator. Not that he's old by any stretch of the imagination. Just these days, you see even at the NFL, you see guys in their late 20s who are coordinators these days. Well, Eli Drinkwitz clearly values experience, not only in his players, but I think pretty clearly with his coordinators and other coaches too. Heck, Curtis Looper's done a heck of a job as a running backs coach, for example. And I really think that Chip Lindsey here could be another Corey Batoon, and in my opinion, that's a very good thing. By the way, and to the idea that there's other programs who certainly were after Chip Lindsey as well, Locked On Ole Miss's Stephen Willis tells me that before Drinkwitz swooped in and hired Lindsey, well, he was going to be the Ole Miss tight ends coach. And by the way, another passenger on the Gus bus is Chip Lindsey. A lot of Gus Malzahn connections there. So Lindsey, a guy that Drinkwitz knows well. And honestly, at this point, I think Drinkwitz has earned the benefit of the doubt. I said this when he was hiring Corey Batoon. Well, the Batoon hire has worked out. So I think Drinkwitz has even more so earned the benefit of the doubt to make the hires that he wants to make. I really trust his judgment, especially in this realm. And Missouri sure could use Jaden Stone for this upcoming Braggin Rights game, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen to me. John Sunvold seemed optimistic previously, but if you listen to Dennis Gates, maybe not so much, and it doesn't seem like just Stone is a full practice go yet. So you know what? Let's talk about what Missouri needs to do, some adjustments, involving Mark Mitchell, possibly Luke Northweather as well. Let's talk about it here coming up on the program. But quickly, hey, if you want to go to Braggin Rights at the last second, or maybe the Gator Bowl, or whatever you're into, quite honestly, from concerts to comedy, well, Gametime is the place to be. If you're getting tickets, if you're getting frustrated with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout, well, you've got to deal with none of that. You get upfront pricing with Gametime. It's absolutely the best way to get tickets. I bought tickets for my brother and sister-in-law a few weeks back. Transferring it to them was easy as pie. You got to love it on Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. So the first thing that stands out to me about the Fighting Illini, well, other than the fact that they have like 5 guys on the team with itch as the last syllable of their name, including, by the way, Peja Stojakovic's son, Andrea Stojakovic, who has played at Cal and Stanford, by the way, before coming to Illinois for his junior season. So he's certainly, his Peja's son is certainly assimilated to being a modern American basketball player. There is no doubt about that. But the thing that I seriously notice about Illinois is that they're incredibly low, one of the absolute lowest teams in the country in terms of turning you over. So I got to imagine the Fighting Illini are packing the paint against Missouri, and they're pretty content, relatively speaking, to allow teams to shoot threes against them. So what that tells me is that the problems that Missouri had against Kansas scoring the ball are likely to return if, number one, if Jaden Stone is likely out in this game, but number 2, if Missouri doesn't make any adjustments. And what I think those adjustments have to be is quite simply just putting more shooting, more offensive ability around Mark Mitchell. And if that's at the expense of defense, so be it. I just don't see a world in which this Missouri team is ever going to be an above-average unit in the SEC defensively. So if Illinois likes to pack the paint defensively, as I believe that they do, I think Missouri does have at least an outside chance of winning this game if they can spread the Illini out. I would honestly just start Luke Northweather or maybe Javon Porter in place of Sean Phillips and see what happens. You just simply need more floor spacing. And really, if you're going to put Phillips in the game, I would have Northweather out there with him more often than not. The thing is, I want Northweather out there with Mark Mitchell a lot too. Northweather is just a guy, for as much as he's obviously not the greatest defender on the planet, boy, he just makes the entire Missouri offense just simply work better with his size, his passing ability, and his ability to shoot the basketball, most importantly, at that size. He just spreads everything out and makes everything easier for Mark Mitchell, who once he starts getting the help and the double teams, well, his life gets a lot more difficult. When he's going one-on-one against almost anybody in the country, he's really tough to stop. So beyond just obviously creating more spacing for Mitchell by putting more shooting on the basketball floor, I think Missouri has got to find ways to make Mitchell's life better by letting him face the basket at times. Because just for everybody in the world, it is easier to defeat, unless you're Nikola Jokic, for example, speaking of guys whose names end in itch. But unless you're Jokic, most people, when your back's to the basket, it is a lot harder to see the floor and defeat a double team. Again, unless you're one of the most special players offensively of all time, that's true for 99% of the basketball population. So you contrast that, having the ball with your back to the basket on the block. Now, what if you're facing the basket at the top of the key? Whether you're more comfortable there or not is not really the point. The point is you can now see the entire floor. And most importantly, where all of the defenders are coming from this spot. And by the way, this is why I hated the double team that Missouri did at the end of the Notre Dame game, among other reasons, but especially because you're throwing a double team at a point guard. He wasn't at the top of the key, but he was far away from the basket on the wing in a spot where he can still see virtually the entire floor. The point is, a double team coming in a different situation would have maybe made more sense. In that spot, it didn't make any sense to me. So with that idea in mind, Mitchell, who is a very good ball handler, by the way, a guy who can play with it facing the basket, I think if we can give him the ball in more spots where he's facing the basket, well, he's going to do a lot better in punishing and defeating those double teams for open shots to guys like Luke Northweather and Jacob Cruz and hopefully Jaden Stone eventually. But again, even with Stone seemingly out, he's got a soft cast that he can now take off and do some limited practicing, as Dennis Gates has said here. And I know people have not liked some of Dennis Gates' messaging here. I feel like he's heard that criticism, to be honest with you, and has been more open here the last month or so. And I thought he was pretty open with the media on Jaden Stone, basically saying, hey, he's progressing here. It's just a matter of how much contact and he can take, where he is in the healing process. I basically take all of this to be he's probably a long shot to play tonight against Illinois. But then Missouri's SEC opener will be, let's see, when is Missouri's SEC opener exactly? I believe January 3rd. Yes, that is correct. Saturday, January 3rd. That'll be more than a week away. I think he's got a really good chance to play in Mizzou Arena in that opener against the defending national champions, the Florida Gators. I do think that will happen, but tonight, probably not. And regardless, even if Stone is back tonight, good chance he's probably a little bit rusty. So quite honestly, with all of that being said, it's just really hard for me to imagine Missouri winning this basketball game. I will say this, though, if the Tigers can pull it off, it would be massive for their season and for their resume, because without it, really Missouri has almost nothing to show for this non-conference season. That was a choice that Dennis Gates made. If basically, hey, the games that were on the schedule, well, Kansas was on the schedule. The Notre Dame game, part of that SEC-ACC challenge. Illinois, hey, that's been a long-time contract, the Braggin Rights thing. Every single game that Dennis Gates chose to play, you had Minnesota, a pretty bad Big Ten team, and other than that, just a bunch of SWAC teams and teams that are 200 to 300s in the rankings. And I don't know what Missouri has gotten out of it. It certainly hasn't been any resume building. There's no doubt about that, but does the team look like it's firing on all cylinders entering Braggin Rights? Because if it's not, then I think you have to totally reimagine what you think scheduling is in the future, because I just don't see what the upside of this week scheduling has been for Missouri so far in the 25-26 season. And when it comes to the transfer portal, by the way, in football, Missouri's reportedly already had some guys who are going to enter. It's not official yet, but Marquise Johnson, for example. Hey, with Marquise, I understand. I really do. But you know what? Missouri had a freshman offensive lineman that has put his name into the portal. And I got to say, that one frustrates me a little bit more as a football fan. So I'm going to explain the difference coming up here in just a little bit. But you know what? We got to talk some more Missouri-Illinois, because the Fighting Illini, minus 8.5 point favorites over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I got to say, that one seems like a stay away to me. I just don't trust Missouri right now, especially, again, with Stone's status in doubt. Whether he plays or not, I just don't love the spot here for Missouri. But, hey, you've got plenty of opportunities here. Monday Night Football, college football playoff coming up. And with FanDuel, you can place bets, by the way, not just before the game, but as the action unfolds. You got to love live betting. I'm kind of a halftime kind of guy. Let's sit back, look at the odds, and think, should this have changed as much as it has, or is this just the variance of the half-to-half type of deal? That's the way I think about it. But however you think about it, you can be right in the middle of the action all season long. Just visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. It is FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. And to say the least, all of this new world we've created of transfer portal, of NIL, well, we're all getting used to it. I, for one, have gotten very used to the idea that players can make money. That doesn't really bother me whatsoever. And even the idea that players are going to transfer and not have to sit out a year. Okay, I can wrap my mind around this idea, but back to Andreas Stojakovic, the guys who transfer literally every single season, seemingly in some cases looking for a payday every single season from a new school. That can't be good for college football or college basketball. It just simply cannot be. And for example, Missouri offensive lineman, former Missouri offensive lineman here in a few weeks, Henry Fanuku is intending to enter the transfer portal, this according to 24/7 Sports. He was a former four-star recruit out of the state of Texas. He redshirted this past season for the Tigers and will have 4 years of eligibility remaining. And here's the deal. Listen, maybe Fanuku has some personal stuff off the field, yada, yada, yada. The reason that this one bugs me a little bit more just from a football perspective, again, just from a pure football perspective, nothing personal here to the young man, but from a football angle, what were you expecting? Like, were you expecting to play a ton after your first season at Missouri? Again, as an offensive lineman, one like Fanuku, a guy who's an obvious physical talent, you watch his high school tape, I mean, he's just mowing people down in the running game. But what you don't see is a lot of technique in the passing game. And that gives him something in common with almost every offensive lineman who's as physically talented as he is who comes out of high school. They're long on talent but short on technique. So it takes them time to develop that technique. Often more than 1 year, by the way. So my point here is that if the reason that Fanuku is transferring after one season, well, I think he's utterly unrealistic. It seems more likely that, well, either he enjoys the dopamine hit of putting his name in the transfer portal and seeing all those offers come in on an annual basis, or just trying to get another paycheck, whatever it might be. I just think at some point, this generation of football players, of basketball players, you're going to have to stay somewhere for a while to actually learn the sport, to develop the nuances of the sport, to recognize your teammates and their tendencies and their nuances. Because whether it's offensive linemen, those 5 guys, or the 5 guys on a basketball court, you need continuity to reach nirvana, to reach the best version of basketball, the best version of football, especially in the passing game, especially with your offensive linemen, with the teammates that you need to have actual continuity with. You can't just shuffle back and forth like it's a pickup shirts and skins basketball game and expect that that's going to be the best version of the sport. Again, this isn't an individual criticism. It's just a bigger picture thing where in sports, team sports, it helps to actually have a team and be together for a while. That's why we have practices, for example. You don't just, again, we're not just doing pickup games every single Saturday, but we are having pickup seasons more and more, it would seem, here in college football. And that's not a great trend. One way or the other, that needs to reverse itself, or frankly, the quality of football is going to go in a direction we don't see it. We don't want it to. So with all that being said, by the way, hopefully this has been a high quality edition of Locked On Mizzou as per usual. Thanks for making this show your first listen. And by the way, if you're an everydayer, you might be interested in checking out the Everydayer Club for $5 a month or $50 a year. You can get this show ad-free. You can get access to our Discord feed. Yeah, you can talk to me all the time. Lots of talking with your fellow everydayers. By the way, it's fun to chop it up over on Discord. And by the way, you can get a free month if you, on your Spotify Wrapped, screenshot it, tag me or the national Locked On Podcasts feed, and we'll get you a free month of the Everydayer Club, by the way. So until next time, I am John Miller, and thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou.